going to walk through a couple of basses that I have that I feel like are going to be a really valuable really valuable addition to almost any bass player's stable. A word or two about what they are, other basses like them, and what you can expect out of them. So this is one that I probably get the most comments on whenever I play it out. It's an Orlando, which is actually a bass that was made in Japan in 1970 or 1971. These aren't particularly common. If you ever seen the Stone Temple Pilots Unplugged, I believe the bass player is playing one of these. And I got this from a vintage dealer here in Nashville, and I absolutely love it. It's got flat ones on it. It's a short scale, so it tends to be very bloomy and warm. It'll do a Beatles type thing, but it's a great bass for ballads. I'm a bass player who comes from a place that I like basses with a lot of definition. I grew up playing, a lot of metal and a lot of funk, so I like a lot of bite and attack. But I've fallen in love more recently with a warm, sort of boomy sound, and this will obviously do. We'll give you that kind of like Beatles Hofner sort of thump. There are a lot of basses like this. Hofner makes a lot of really great short scale hollow body basses. It's a super useful thing for anything that's more mellow, and I just love it because it's kind of an oddball. I haven't seen a lot of them around. Its output is actually fairly hot, and it has a 3-way pickup selector and a tone knob. I leave the tone all the way up and pickup selector in the middle. I just like how the natural tone of it. I like how quickly the note dies. And yeah, so it's a great bass for ballads or Americana, anything you want to play. If you're playing against like an acoustic guitar or banjo or something like that, you want it to sound almost like an upright without the danger and expense of buying one and learning how to play it and then driving it all the way across town. You could also have one of these tiny little guys. Another bass that I feel like a working bass player is definitely going to want is the active 5-string. Usually what a friend of mine calls a Fender-shaped object. Anything a Fender, Sadowski, Suhr, Mike Lull, something like that. This particular one is a custom shop that I just got that I'm very excited about, that has a Sadowski preamp, Nordstrand pickups, a Hipshot bridge, and was master built by Dennis Galuska, and it feels and just sounds of it. Again, something that you want for anything more high-powered and modern. This is definitely one that has plenty of definition. This is much better for modern stuff, rock, anything you want to play with a pick that you want it. You want something like this that's responsive. It has a nice hot output. Modern country relies a lot on stuff like this. I'm a big believer in the 5-string. I know some guys get upset for reasons I can't possibly fathom. That a bass should have 4 strings doesn't make any sense to me, because this has, if anything, more bass. But it's definitely something, if you haven't gotten your fingers around the idea of playing on one, get you a cheap one and just get into the idea of where the notes fall on the string. It's definitely something you want to be comfortable with. I have basses that I have tuned down super low to basically supplant the idea of a 5-string, but getting a well-made one is something you're going to find is pretty necessary. It's just nice not to have to reach for a different bass. If I'm doing a show on a small stage and just one of the songs happens to be in C sharp or something like that, and the recording, you need to have that low note available. It's great not to have to reach for something else and have, lug two basses in and out, anything like that. It's definitely a must-have. So yeah, so you got a short scale weirdo hollow body, hopefully with flat wounds on it, and some kind of high test. This has an 18-volt preamp, so with a lot of output, but it'll definitely put you in that sort of like that modern place, that modern mindset. This is a precision bass, which I'm assuming most of you are going to recognize. Also, I think an absolute must-have, an incredibly versatile instrument for how few controls and options it has. Just really one of the great basses that responds very well to different approaches. You can get a whole range of tones out of something like this. Anything from anything from thumpy to if you end up on a pump gig for something. It'll do just about anything. I suppose a word on playing with a pick, which I know is another thing that's kind of divisive for bass players. I would really recommend learning how to do it and learning how to do it well. I've been on numerous gigs and in many situations where it's required, and it can be a lot more useful and versatile as a technique. 'Cause I think people tend to think of Sid Vicious and the Sex Pistols as somebody was sloppy and imprecise. I would urge you to look up any YouTube video featuring Bobby Vega, and there's an attack and approach you can get with a pick, even if you're being subtle with it. There's a lot to be said for playing with a pick, and I guess I understand why some people turn their nose up at it. I wouldn't turn my nose up at anything. I think one of the best pieces of advice that I got off a podcast of all places was that there's only one answer in show business, and that's to say yes. So you want to be able to say a confident yes to almost anything. Do you play jazz? You want to be able to say yes and mean it. Do you play with a pick? Can you slap? All that kind of stuff. There's really no reason to turn your nose up at anything. Every playing approach, every genre has something it can teach you about the instrument that will be very applicable to almost any other genre. I mean, you can learn how to play with a pick if you're playing, pop punk, and you'll be surprised how useful it is when you're playing funk, obviously rock or country or anything like that. Yeah, I learned about left hand muting from playing to and learning Rocco, press. And now it's a technique that I use all the time. You can pick up all these little tricks from all these different quadrants and then bring them into different situations and contexts and get these really interesting sounds out of it. Because in the end, that's the only thing that really matters is how does something sound. But this would be another bass that I would absolutely recommend as far as being a working or gigging bass player. You see these on stage a lot, and I think you see them up there for a reason. They're versatile, reliable. There's only so many things that can go wrong with them. This is the one that I actually smashed in half at a show a long time ago, and it was glued back together, and it plays as well as it ever did. They're resilient, tough basses, and they sound great. This last one is a bit more of a specialty instrument, something, again, I imagine a lot of you will be familiar with. It's a fretless bass, one from which obviously the frets have been removed that allows you to do. Allows you to do these very expressive glissandos and to actually be able to use a classical vibrato for great effect, express yourself with intonation. These take a lot of skill to play that I am currently working on. And they aren't necessarily something that's a must-have, but it's a great next level instrument that the amount of concentration it takes to play it, since all of a sudden you're having to concentrate so much more on where your left hand is. This is a great example of something that, because it is difficult to play and it draws your attention so much more into what you're doing, is very likely to change what you're playing, and how the part that you come up with can be very dictated by the equipment and instrument that you're using. And for me, because it is difficult, because it draws your focus into your left hand, I tend to play differently that way. I like playing an instrument that's difficult because it makes me stop and focus, and maybe I won't do, a run or a lick in the same place due to just the way that makes you think about the instrument altogether. And I just love the way they sound.